welcome to the deep dive. We spend a lot of time on the show talking about specific events and ideas, but today um, we're going to look at something a little bit bigger. We're going to look at learning.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't mean, going back to school or anything like that. I mean learning as a way of life, as a way of being in the world.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and you've actually given me some really interesting reflections on this topic. And what I want to do in this deep dive is really, explore those reflections
Okay.
and see if we can pull out some practical takeaways. I mean, how can we all become more effective learners without feeling overwhelmed by all the information out there?
Yeah, because I think what's so fascinating about learning is that, um, we all do it right. I mean, from the moment we're born, we're constantly taking in information and making sense of the world around us. But it's how we approach that process, how we view that process that really makes all the difference.
Right. And I think a lot of what you're talking about in these reflections is about shifting our mindset about learning.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of seeing it as this thing that happens in a classroom or, with a textbook, seeing it as something that we're doing all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that everyday mindset, the observing, the listening, the reflecting. It's like being present and engaged with everything that's happening around you.
And I don't know about you, but when I think back to being a kid, it really was all about asking why all the time.
Yeah.
Why is the sky blue? Why can't we fly?
Right, those fundamental questions that drive our understanding.
Exactly. And somewhere along the line, I think a lot of us we lose that. We lose that natural curiosity. Maybe we're afraid of looking stupid or
Yeah.
something. But I think those questions, they're really at the heart of learning and discovery.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the great thinkers, the innovators, the people who have really pushed the boundaries of human knowledge, they never stopped asking why.
Right. And that reminds me of one of the reflections that you shared. You were talking about your grandfather and the lessons he taught you about learning.
Yeah, I'll never forget sitting with him in the park, watching the people go by, and he would always say, "Every person you meet, every book you read, every mistake you make, it's all part of the learning process."
Right. And that image that you used of life being like a giant puzzle where each day brings a new piece.
Right. And it's up to us to figure out how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah. I love that. And it really emphasizes that point that learning isn't confined to a specific place or time. It's happening all around us constantly.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the first key takeaways here, right? Is to never stop asking questions. Never stop being curious because that's what fuels our growth. It's what keeps us moving forward.
Absolutely. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about something that can be a bit tougher to face, to
Yeah.
embrace, and that's failure. Yeah, because we're often taught to fear failure, to avoid it at all costs. But your reflections really challenge that perspective. They talk about failure as being an incredible opportunity for learning.
Yeah, because it's inevitable, right? We all make mistakes. We all fall short sometimes. The question is, how do we respond to those setbacks?
Right. And I think one of the most powerful reflections you shared was about a time early in your career when you made a pretty significant mistake.
Yeah. I was working on a financial report and I completely messed it up. I mean, it was a major error that ended up costing the company money,
Wow.
and I was devastated. I mean, I thought I was going to get fired. I thought my career was over before it even really began.
Oh, wow.
But my boss, he surprised me. He didn't yell, he didn't get angry. He just sat me down and he said, "Okay, let's figure out what went wrong. Let's learn from this. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again."
Wow. And what a powerful lesson that must have been, not just about the mistake itself, but about how to approach failure in general.
Yeah, because it shifted my whole perspective. Instead of seeing that failure as the end, I started to see it as a beginning, as a chance to learn and grow.
And it's interesting. I think so often we focus on the outcome of our actions, on whether
Mm-hmm.
we succeed or fail. But what your boss did was really shift the focus to the process, to the learning that can come from any experience.
Exactly. It's about analyzing what happened, taking responsibility, and then using that knowledge to improve.
So the key takeaway here is that, failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. It's an opportunity to learn and grow.
Absolutely. And speaking of learning from others, let's talk about empathy and active listening
Mhm.
because these are such crucial skills not just for for building relationships, but also for learning and expanding our understanding of the world.
Yeah. And you shared a really beautiful definition of empathy in your reflections. You said it's about understanding with the heart, not just hearing with the ears.
Right. And it's so easy to go through life just listening to people on a surface level without really connecting with them, without really trying to understand their perspective.
Right. And that reminds me of the story you told about meeting that elderly gentleman at the coffee shop.
Yeah. He was sitting there alone and he just looked so lost. And I ended up sitting down with him and just listening to his story. He had recently lost his wife and he didn't have any family nearby. And he was just so lonely.
Yeah.
And I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone is just to listen, to be present with them, to let them know that they're heard and understood.
Yeah.
And I think that act of listening, of really trying to understand another person's experience, that's where empathy really comes in.
Yeah. And it's also where a lot of learning can happen because everyone has a story to tell. Everyone has something to teach us.
Right. I mean,
Which
if we're open to it, if we're willing to listen with empathy, we can learn so much from the people around us. Exactly. So the takeaway here is to practice active listening, to ask questions, to really try to see the world through other people's eyes, because that's how we broaden our understanding, that's how we grow as individuals.
I love that. Now let's move on to another topic that you touched on in your reflections, gratitude. And
Yeah.
and I think this is something that can be really easy to overlook, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages about what we lack, what we need to buy, what we need to achieve.
Yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in that cycle of wanting more, of never feeling satisfied with
Yeah.
what we have.
Right. And I remember reading in your reflections about this practice of writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day.
Mm.
And I have to admit, at first I thought, well, that seems a little bit simplistic. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized how powerful that could be.
Yeah, because it's a way of intentionally shifting our focus to the good things in our lives, to the things that we often take for granted.
Right. And you actually shared a personal story about how practicing gratitude helped you through a really difficult time in your life.
Yeah. I was going through a period of just feeling really overwhelmed, like everything was going wrong.
Mm.
And a friend suggested that I try keeping a gratitude journal.
Mm. Yeah.
And so I did. And at first, it was hard. I mean, I was so focused on all the negative things that it was difficult to even think of anything to be grateful for. But I kept at it. And slowly, I started to notice small things like the fact that I had a roof over my head, that I had food to eat, that I had people in my life who loved me.
Yeah.
And the more I focused on those things, the more I realized how much I actually had to be grateful for.
Mm.
And it really started to shift my perspective. It didn't make the problems go away, but it helped me to see them in a different light.
And I think that's one of the key things about gratitude, right? It's not about pretending that everything's perfect. It's about recognizing the good things, even amidst the challenges.
Exactly. And it's about cultivating a sense of appreciation for what we have rather than constantly focusing on what we lack.
Right. So the key takeaway here is to practice gratitude, to make it a habit, to make it a part of our daily lives,
Mhm.
because it can have a really profound impact on our happiness, on our well-being, on our overall outlook on life.
Absolutely. And finally, let's talk about the last key takeaway that you highlighted in your reflections, the importance of constant improvement.
Yeah. And I think this is something that can feel really daunting to a lot of people
Yeah.
because we often think about improvement as this, huge monumental task.
Right. Like we have to make these massive changes all at once.
Exactly. But what your reflections emphasize is that real improvement, lasting improvement, is about making small, consistent changes over time.
Yeah. It's about those daily habits, those little things that we do each day that add up over time.
Right. And you shared a really great example of this in your own life about learning to play the guitar.
Yeah. I'd always wanted to learn to play guitar, but I was always so intimidated by it. I thought it was too hard, that I was too old to start, that I didn't have the time.
Mm.
But then a few years ago, I decided to just give it a try. And I committed to practicing for just 15 minutes a day.
Wow.
And that was it, just 15 minutes. And at first I was terrible. I mean, my fingers wouldn't cooperate. The chords sounded awful. I wanted to quit, but I kept at it. And slowly, over time, I started to get better. And now, a few years later, I can actually play, a decent number of songs.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's all because I made that commitment to those small, consistent actions.
Right. And I think that's such a powerful lesson, right? It's not
Yeah.
about being perfect. It's about making progress.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that even small steps, taken consistently over time, can lead to significant results.
So the key takeaway here is to embrace those small, consistent habits, to focus on progress, not perfection, and to remember that every effort, no matter how small, counts.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay.
What are some of the learning experiences that have shaped your life? What are those moments, those lessons, those habits that have helped you to grow and evolve as a person? And how can you apply what we've talked about today to continue on that journey of learning and growth?
That's a great question. And I think it's a question that we can all benefit from asking ourselves regularly. Because ultimately, learning is a lifelong process. It's
Yeah.
something that we can and should be doing every single day. So keep your mind open, be curious, embrace the challenges, and never stop learning.
Beautifully said.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.